I
This
just know
meeting is
that
being recorded.
I just know that in my I was participated in a I don't know if you've heard of the Rudolf Steiner Fellowship Foundation Fellowship Community in Spring Valley. I was there for many years, and I was in touch with a couple of, especially one of the Vorstand in Dornach. I had some close working with, and not that just wasn't it wasn't a topic. It didn't exist.
So I think, hang on a minute.
Well, I'm sorry I missed last night.
This may go back to Kyenda's point, and then let us begin, that many in leadership positions are members of the youth circle. And the youth circle pledges to pure thinking and pure will, and no reference to the middle feeling sphere, the purity of feelings, communication, breathing, living, working with one another. So there you have, and that's why I'm hoping Kyenda can join us again. That I think is really key, because if we're not balanced, if we are taken by these extremes of thinking and will and don't have the mediating forces of the heart, then we're asking for trouble, I believe. But let us do this, friends. We've gathered now. Let us begin with an opening verse, and then we'll pick up our thread. Thank you all for joining us. May our feelings penetrate into the center of our hearts and seek in love to unite themselves with human beings seeking the same goal, with spirit beings who, bearing grace, strengthening us from realms of light and illuminating our love, are gazing down upon our earnest, heartfelt striving. But I ask Chris if you can bring up once again that the knowledge of the higher worlds. And later on, there's a remarkable passage about the meeting with the guardian of the threshold. A remarkable passage. Would you be able to bring forth that text again and put it on screen share?
Sure. What do you remember where in that, so I can try and get closer to it? Which chapter it might be in?
Is that possible, Chris? I don't hear you.
Do you happen to know?
You're on mute.
No,
I
I'm
think
not
you're
on mute.
Chris. Oh, hang on. That might be my problem. So can you speak for a moment? I'm not hearing you at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
I do now, yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, do you happen to know approximately which chapter it is, so at least I can?
I will find it, but I'd like to read a little bit further where we left off last night, and then I will find the section that we're talking about.
Okay. Give me a moment. Knowledge of the higher worlds. Okay. All right. Share. Where is it?
Should be in the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, I got it. Hmm. There we go. Okay, do you have it? Is it
There
up?
we are. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
this is where we left off.
So would you be willing just to read on from the next paragraph where we left off?
Okay. Just a minute
And
here.
then once we're sort of centered in this, I will lead us to the passage on the guardian of the threshold.
He must begin with a certain fundamental attitude of soul. This is the person who is seeking initiation. In spiritual science, this fundamental attitude is called the path of veneration, of devotion to truth and knowledge. Without this attitude, no one can become a student. Disposition shown in their childhood by subsequent students of higher knowledge is well known to the experienced in these matters. There are children who look up with religious awe to those whom they venerate. For such people, they have a respect which forbids them, even in the deepest recess of their heart, to harbor any thought of criticism or opposition. Such children grow up into young men and women who feel happy when they are able to look up to anything that fills them with veneration. From the ranks of such children are recruited many students of higher knowledge. Have you ever paused outside the door of some venerated person, and have you, on this, your first visit, felt a religious awe as you pressed on the handle to enter the room which for you is a holy place? If so, a feeling has been manifested within you which may be the germ of your future adherence to the path of knowledge. It is a blessing for every human being in process of development to have such feelings upon which to build. Only it must not be thought that this disposition leads to submissiveness and slavery. What was once a childlike veneration for persons becomes, later, a veneration for truth and knowledge. Experience teaches that they can best hold their heads erect who have learned to venerate where veneration is due, and veneration is always fitting when it flows from the depths of the heart. I'm afraid we read that part yesterday. Do you want me to continue reading here or find where we actually left off?
Why don't you continue reading? I don't think you can read this often enough, Chris. Why don't you continue reading?
Okay. If we do not develop within ourselves this deeply rooted feeling that there is something higher than ourselves, we shall never find the strength to evolve to something higher. The initiate has only acquired the strength to lift his head to the heights of knowledge by guiding his heart to the depths of veneration and devotion. The heights of the spirit can only be climbed by passing through the portals of humility. You can only acquire right knowledge when you have learnt to esteem it. Man has certainly the right to turn his eyes to the light, but he must first acquire this right. There are laws in the spiritual life, as in the physical life. Rub a glass rod with an appropriate material, and it will become electric. That is, it will receive the power of attracting small bodies. This is in keeping with the law of nature. It is known to all who have learnt a little physics. Similarly, acquaintance with the first principles of spiritual science shows that every feeling of true devotion harbored in the soul develops a power which may, sooner or later, lead further on the path of knowledge. The student, God, the student who is gifted with this feeling, or who is fortunate enough to have had it inculcated in a suitable education, brings a great deal along with him when, later in life, he seeks admittance to higher knowledge. Failing such preparation, he will encounter difficulties at the very first step, unless he undertake by rigorous self-education to create within himself this inner life of devotion. In our time, it is especially important that the full attention be paid to this point. Our civilization tends more toward critical judgment and condemnation than toward devotion and selfless veneration. Our children already criticize far more than they worship, but every criticism, every adverse judgment passed, dispenses the powers of the soul for the attainment of higher knowledge in the same measure that all veneration and reverence develops them. In this, we do not wish to say anything against our civilization. There is no question here of leveling criticism against it. To this critical faculty, this self-conscious human judgment, this test all things and hold fast what is best, we owe the greatness of our civilization. Man could never have attained to the science, the industry, the commerce, the rights relationships of our time, had he not applied to all things the standard of his critical judgment. But what we have thereby gained in external culture, we have had to pay for with a corresponding loss of higher knowledge of spiritual life. It must be emphasized that higher knowledge is not concerned with the veneration of persons, but the veneration of truth and knowledge.
Chris, thank you. Let's pause for a moment, if I may suggest, and let's just invite comments from people to what we've just read. And I'll start by just noting the word think and thank, denken and dunken in German, share the same etymology. That is, what's being said is that we can't think rightly unless we think with thankfulness. So already the mood of soul, the appreciation, the devotion becomes critical part of the process of attaining knowledge. And this book is entitled Knowledge of Higher Worlds, which suggests we need a higher knowledge. I'd be very interested if people have comments on what we've read thus far in this regard. What is being characterized as the attitude of soul that we must adopt as we enter upon a path of knowledge of higher worlds.
Well, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but what appears to me here is that Steiner is pointing out the need for an inner development, an inner activity, an inner life, i.e., that which is activated by our feelings. Now, outwardly, where he speaks about the criticism and the criticalness of the society, which in fact has given us the life, the sciences and the way of life that we have now, and that's a good thing. but it was at a cost. And that cost was the complete focus outwardly without a corresponding inner or inwardness to bring a balance to that outer activity, that outer life. Consequently, according to Steiner, we have become imbalanced. We have lost that inner connection. And I think that's what I was trying to allude to earlier, Charlene, is why people are unable to hear or understand or want to pay attention or are able to pay attention to those people who have been able to either develop or have come with that inner capacity of the various awarenesses beyond just the pure physical.
Now, there are criticism and judgment also, but that is related to that inner development. I think we're less critical and judgmental. We're more open-minded when we have that inner development. I really appreciate hearing these words and reading them. I had a friend who just would always read chapter 1. Oh, this is chapter 1, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he would just keep reading it over and over again. He had a little bit of trouble, continuing on in the book, but this one. And even, I mean, maybe knowledge of the higher worlds will come naturally. However, that's not really my goal, but to just be a better human being. And these words really help with that goal.
I
Beautiful.
think also that you have to be committed, you have to have a commitment and dedication in order to achieve what he's talking about.
Yes.
But my experience with Queen Mother and many of my Black brothers and sisters were not so intellectually trained, but are in touch and aware, as we made the distinction between knowledge and awareness. And that is, there is a very real sense of help me understand, Lord, gratitude when insight and knowledge comes. Really how can I put it? Well, in a way, it's like these lovely services. When I was in Tuskegee, the minister, the Black church, when he gave the sermon, the congregation was, "Amen, yea, Lord, say it again, we're with you." This communal spirit. It wasn't sort of isolated in one's own cabinet, in one's own cell, but really kind of a Pentecost experience. I don't know if what I'm conveying is particularly clear, but
I see it as common sense. And I go back to that first paragraph of the Declarations. We have certain unalienable rights, okay, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we have to do the number 2 there, dissolve the political bands and assume amongst the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled us. We have certain unalienable, in other words, it's not supposed to be contracted. And yet, all of this is contracted by birth certificate, this, that, education, and stuff like that. So, people need to become aware that they can be themselves if they choose. They just have to make that choice and stand by it and realize that we can do this if we are unified and trust the intellectual and the physical properties of others in a way that manifests itself.
But we as Black,
body politic, body of Messiah, however. Yeah. that's where my mind goes with all of this. So anyway, I yield.
We of the black race does not have all of the things available to us that can allow us to have the higher knowledge. So therefore, we are grateful for the opening of the mind. So we commit ourselves, uh, and we dedicate. I dedicate myself to learning, to having an open mind, open pathway, to hear what people has to say or share with me in order that I can better myself. That's what my inalienable rights give me, the power to do that.
Yep.
Yes, but it's the one who does the teaching that has to have the credentials. They have to have the license, the certification, da 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 da. Those are leaned, for the teachers. So it my mind goes in those directions. So yes, but you're right, Bernice. Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Stuart.
thank you, Chris. I'd like to invite Steve to please not have any expectations. We're talking about how we relate not just to a body of knowledge, but to the spirit behind it. And Steve, if you can hear me, and if you feel so moved, don't feel obliged. What I've appreciated very much about your work over the years with Uriel, in the spirit of Uriel, is that you're very aware that you're dealing with not just abstract theories and knowledge, but with a being and what that being asks of you. I don't know, Steve, if you've been following this thread, if you feel you can speak to this at all. What is asked for us when we move beyond the intellectual abstractions to the living forces?
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, good evening, everybody. I came in a little bit late. Sorry about that.
And Chris, Steve, just so you know, it's Chris and Bernice and Nikki and Andrew, Charlene, and myself. I think that's it.
Thank you, Stuart. I want to comment on something that Queen Mother just said. It so fascinated me when I finally came upon this lecture of Steiner's in March 3rd, 1923, when he is giving a lecture to the workmen on the second Gertianum after the first Gertianum had burned. And when he spoke to the workmen, he's speaking to artisans, and I think many people can realize that when you're realizing he's speaking to the workmen, he speaks differently and in a more really conversational, down to earth way. Not so intellectual, very creative. And in this lecture, it's on color. And in one part of it, he talks about color in relationship to the human races, different races. And then he describes that in a most wonderful way, that each of the races, first of all, he says that there are no pure races anymore. So in a certain way, I think Andrew brought this up the other night, that, or maybe Patrick did, one of these talks, that there are none of us are really of a pure race. We all, especially in America, we are mixtures of so many different cultural influences, each of us. But that aside, he's saying that each of the dominant racial characteristics has its own doorway to the spirit. And he speaks about the North European having this connection to the pineal gland and intellectualism as its dominant organ through which it finds its way to spiritual beholding. It's not itself a direct spiritual perception, but it's the organ through which spiritual perception arises for that people. And then he talks about the Oriental. He speaks about the black races and the yellow races, and each of the races, and he goes through them. And he describes that for one of the races, it's the heart realm, and for another one, it's the head realm, and for another one, it's the metabolic realm. And what's interesting to me, especially in relationship to the fact that we are Americans, is that he different places he says this remarkable thing. He says, with regard to the black races, you have then this gift within the metabolic realm, which is not the realm of higher consciousness, but it's a realm of a wisdom of deep devotion that's more instinctive. But that is the doorway through which that cultural group finds it as its natural gift, its inalienable gift of a direction toward the spirit. And I think also it's interesting for me, having worked with this question from a number of different angles, that I feel too when he really speaks about those different peoples that come to America. You know, the white race in America is not like the European race. We have this land that we're on that greatly influences us. The magnetic forces alone are powerful. He talks about, you know, and I'm a good example of this, the Anglo-American who comes here from Europe. The second generation already, you'll see longer arms and longer legs on the offspring. That he's describing that the magnetic forces in the earth itself affect the physical development of all human beings that are on this continent. And so I think when we're talking about European anthroposophy, it's always this challenge, because what comes through Steiner in a European orientation to begin with is just the beginning of the doorway through which it's working. But if you follow his work and you take it up in your own way of trying to sort it out for yourself, you begin to see he gives so much common sense advice to basically anybody who's striving earnestly. These qualities of the soul, they're universal. They're not really culturally specific. And so there's always this need, I think, out of one's quest to go deeper and deeper into what Steiner's bringing before one finds one's own gifts from it, because you have to kind of sort out a lot of the sense of context from which he's first bringing it, which is a form of appreciating and recognizing and honoring what he's doing in his own time. And then out of that, you begin to sort out things from different things you read, or different lectures you read, or your studies. You start to get these nuances that relate more directly to you and your soul, independent of really where you're living. All that said, I think that in my sense of confirmation of what I feel that I know, I've had certain experiences that I take no credit for, but I've had certain moments in time, usually after a profound struggle and prolonged crisis, of being approached by the divine forces that reveal something to me. And these were shocking experiences for me. At the same time, they were tremendously overwhelming in such a positive way that they infused my higher self with a sense of myself more consciously. That did not come from any meditative discipline. That came from a gift of grace from the spiritual world and spiritual beings who have made me understand that, and increasingly I have learned to understand in my own way, in my own really quite modest way, to the extent that it's true for me. And so this question of Uriel is a doorway to a connection to a being that helps us receive admonishments that help, gives us constructive urgings of conscience to recognize the good from evil in a way that is made clear within oneself in relationship with one's own soul activity. And to the extent one is able to listen and receive those admonitions, one becomes able to recognize these forces also active in those around oneself, and then one gains over time a sense of a deeper and deeper understanding of these forces, and it just becomes a doorway through which one finds one's way to the gifts that one has and the perspective one has, and which one then can share from in certain moments when it's appropriate. And that's my experience. It's really about I don't, I pray a lot, and there are certain prayers and so on that I use, but I'm not really. I've discovered I'm not constituted to develop a European anthroposophical methodology. I don't really have a strong intellectual pineal organ, I can guarantee you. I do have an extraordinary earnest heart and devotional will that I've come to learn that those are my gifts, and at first they were largely unconscious but genuine. And I think that's really what we can find pretty much widespread in America. People who are not conscious of themselves being so devotional or earnest, but they feel it, and they actually reveal it in how they present themselves. But they may still be very much like a Parsifal, with not much self-reflection to understand it in a cognitive way. But that comes in, I think, that's one of the gifts of finding one's way to Steiner's work is, as a cultural American, is that you'll find elements, we each find something that speaks to us. And then that stirs in us, and gradually we become aware of ourselves more consciously. And that's like Steiner saying this is how our thinking, our powers of thinking and feeling and willing develop. They develop through this kind of resonance that comes through our quest. And in that sense, Steiner's lectures and works can be very helpful material for study, which then quickens these organs self-knowledge as we realize that this is working us in a specific way. And we start to have our own voice and our own way of expressing it. And then we realize that actually each of us expresses that differently. And we start to be able to hear each other, even though it's coming differently. So some of us can appear to be not very intellectual, but actually when you follow their life, like to my mind, Queen Mother's life and her story, the capacity to actually be reasonable, is itself the foundation of a true intellectualism. It is just simply the reflection upon experience and putting things together that makes sense. And that's reasonable. When it becomes logic, and logic becomes dominant as the only kind of reasonableness, then it becomes rigidified into a one-sided intellectualism. But actually, I think that the seed of the intellect is actually in the reasoning, and the reasoning actually has a heart dimension in it. It guides the head, really. So it's really not separate. They really do happen at the same time for those who are earnest and who are seeking to understand, have questions. We want to understand the reason for something. And Great Mother, and you told your story. I mean, was a thing that excited me because from a very young age, you wanted to understand what's the reason behind that. And your voice goes up high when you say that because you could feel the truth of it for you subjectively. And so it's not you see, there's a difference between an active intellect that is seeking reasonableness and an intellect that then becomes dogmatic in the form of using reasoning and logic, and it excludes the heart. So I think we have to be careful of being too quick to say we're not intellectual. I think we just understand that we have a very strong reasoning mind as Americans, but it's also connected very strongly to our willing and our feeling actually in ourselves. And I think that's where anthroposophy can help us differentiate these gifts that we have that are not so conscious, but they really are part of the wholeness of our seeking an ever greater union with one another. That lives in us strongly. And at the same time, these other forces that have polarized each of the powers of knowing are all about us. So we're all in this muddy water together. At the same time, we have these gifts of possibility that are inherently within us, inalienable parts of us.
Steve, thank you. As you're speaking, a very simple question comes to my mind, and I'd like to invite everybody, if you wish, to speak to it. And I'll begin. And that question is, what is it? Why do we seek understanding? Why do we seek knowledge? Why do we study? Why do we read, be it lectures of Rudolf Steiner or whatever? Why do we do it? Why do we do it?
I'm not sure that the way of asking it that way might be just a little bit too narrow. If we're all individuals, the question can also be phrased: what in us that drives us to seek understanding of any kind, so that each person then can reflect upon how that has lived in oneself. And so I don't think it's a weak question. I think it's a question of how does each of us, because we're all differently endowed. So I think we really want to just hear how the emergence of what becomes a source of a quest comes to my heart and mind. How is it awakened? And because then the individual is reflecting upon their own emergence. Then we have something quite living and creative.
Steve, I can appreciate that, but there's something behind my query here. And
Well, be more explicit then, if you would be.
Well, let me continue, if I may. So why do we seek knowledge? Why do we seek understanding? What drives us? What drives us? I can say for myself that early on, I was quite young, 12, 13. I had this question: what is the difference between the human being and the universe? And what was clear to me was that I couldn't have asked that question. It wouldn't have even been a question that made sense unless I had something of the answer. What is the difference between the human being and the universe? And for me, I'm stretching back many years with this recollection. It has to do with the whole process of communion. Queen Mother and I spoke the other day of the fact that the picture that friend Rudolf Steiner presents of evolution is that once we were a composite being, the mineral, plant, animal, human, we're all one and together. And then as we strove in our evolution, the excessive mineral elements that would have hindered us, that would have made us sclerotic, were cast off, so to speak, and descended to the earth and became the mineral kingdom, that which was once part of us, the excess vital forces that in the excess would just proliferate, and thereby hinder our coming to ourself, were cast off, descended to the earth, became the plant kingdom. The excess animal forces, that part of us where we are a bully or a snake or a fox or a bull in a china shop, those excess soul forces that would have hindered us in our evolution were cast off, descended to the earth, became the animal kingdom. And so we arrive at the Sphinx with the human countenance, peering into the future, but behind the body of the bull, of the lion, and the wings of an eagle. So seeking to emerge out of this this composite sense with the animal kingdom, seeking to come to ourself. And then, as Dr. Mace in the book Blessed by Illness says, that when we can come to ourself, unhindered by the excess minerality, the excess vitality, the excess animality, which otherwise, I mean, the illnesses from sclerosis in the mineral kingdom all the way through are an expression of this excess that these kingdoms took on this sacrifice in order for us to be relieved and freed to be able to come to ourselves. But now in doing that, we need to stop and turn around and recognize these kingdoms and then effect a kind of a communion to reintegrate them consciously, being through preparing food, be it through taking medicines, minerals, plants, animals as medicines, taking them into us and embodying them, and in a certain way consecrating them when we do it consciously out of our free, so to speak, self or I am, that was able to emancipate itself because it didn't have to deal with those excesses. So what I'm saying, and I'm sorry for going on as long as I have, is that for me, the search for knowledge is a kind of a communion, is a reunion, is a communion, is a making whole, is uniting with the universe. And I'm curious if that, how that speaks to others, if at all.
Well, this is very interesting, Stuart, to listen to you describe that this way. Very, very helpful. In a certain way, you and I are so very different. And I think more and more over these years, my understanding of knowledge in a technical sense and my understanding of understanding itself in a technical sense, that they're really quite different. Knowledge and understanding are quite different. In the same way that Jesus and Mary are quite different. They both have a universal understanding, a universal beingness. And in the being of Mary, you have this universal understanding. And in the being of Christ, you have this being of, well, actually, both of those. You could say in Micah, you have this universal knowledge. where there's actually real spiritual, cognitive experience. Understanding is more a heartfelt sensing that satisfies the inner quest of that soul. It comes to an understanding of something. I'm very much in this direction myself. And so this is so interesting, Stuart, how you then illuminate why you asked the question as you did. And it sounds so, it's like kind of the European anthroposophical path of discovery with this knowledge of the details of evolution and so on, and how that those beings are effective in why we are the way we are. So helpful to a thinking soul. I would suggest that there's another doorway that we can look at the same thing, this one of understanding, which is more in tune the way I have come to understand that. And that I would say that the issue, the why is your question. Why do we seek for something? It has to do with the nature of our karma. What I mean by that is that before we know from anthroposophical spiritual science that, and we probably know this in other ways now because it's being revealed in so many different ways by different people. But before we incarnate, we meet in conference in a certain way with the Christ being and the Lord of Karma, and all the beings who are going to be active in our specific karma when we incarnate. And there's a preview of the potential of this life, and you might say the script is sort of gone over, and all those characters of us involved participate in that. And then we incarnate, we forget about that, and then we meet each other in different ways to help carry forth the higher intention of this incarnation. And so there's a tremendous amount of spiritual knowledge that's behind what one says when one refers to karma. What the power of destiny and karma is, you meet it on the street. You come, you forget, and you very much bump into one another, and events and coincidences and all this. It really is part of the dynamics of everyday life, and it's very much the gesture in America. We bring these mixtures, all kinds of people. It's just a constant mixture of everything going on. A lot of chaos. But there are these powers of destiny at work. And the stirring of the reason why I came, and the reason why you came in relationship to me, it stirs in us. And we bump into each other, and elements of that element wake up. And then it starts to move. And so very much of the understanding why I'm here, why I've come, you see, is always stirring. But it's not about, I don't need to know the knowledge about the evolution of the earth. No. I'm oriented toward, because it's my cultural path, to wake up to my karma, because I am with a people whose primary task is actually to wake up to their karma and become aware of the laws of karma, which are the laws of morality. The karma really is about learning the laws of morality. And so one stream can be oriented towards being stirred by a need to know, because they are part of a path of knowledge, of spiritual awakening. But another stream is part of understanding why they're coming to meet and work through these human differences that cause so much stirring of my thinking, feeling, and willing, in a way of just understanding, what is this about? And these are two different but complementary paths, and I think that in a certain way, that's a description of the path of European anthroposophical spiritual science, and there's something other that's here in America. And so I don't think that, if there's a lot of Americans who are walking around who feel that knowing the paths of evolution help them understand their karma, that would be really illuminating for me. but I feel that it's more organic. It says, Carl Koenig when he came to America, he says, the interesting thing in America is you meet your destiny on the street. You get on a bus, and within a couple miles along the ride, you start talking to somebody, and all of a sudden you're talking about all kinds of things in your life. It happens so easily here. Europeans who come here are amazed at that we become so interactive in conversation, whereas in Europe you have a formalized language of the formal you and I that keeps that barrier from being so spontaneous. So I think
Steve,
these questions of why, what makes us seek understanding is not just related to knowledge. I think it also has to do with the mystery of why we're here.
Yeah.
Morally, yeah. And I think that's very important for us to understand that, because we really are a people about being moral, not about knowing, but about being moral.
yeah, good. Let us make room for now others who've been listening. Andrew, are you there? Charlene, Nikki, Queen Mother, Chris. Let's Ben Brian and Bernhardt, welcome. So join, friends, if you wish, and bring your thoughts to what we've shared.
I don't think anybody could say it as well as he did. Beautiful.
Nice. Chris, you started us off. Any comments from your side? You and I were the Americans who went to Europe to study.
Going way back to what Queen Mother was saying, and then what Steve was trying to bring. I look at what was the impulse that brought the you might say the Europeans here, the white Europeans. And if we look at our situation today, is where we've kind of gotten lost in the physical world, so much so that we are working with amoral perspectives, amoral ideas, amoral logic. And as we know, that can take us in either direction. And unfortunately, it's taking us in a direction that's making life very difficult for all of us. So I think we need to look a little more carefully at what was said in reference to each people bring their own impulse, bring the impulse from different perspectives. And at this point, that's probably where I want to leave it.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
I I was dropped, Chris. I'm sorry. Have you finished or?
Yes,
you-
I'm finished.
I apologize. I was dropped.
Hmm.
I just want to harken back for a moment to Steve and my exchange. I'm not looking, Steve, so much for knowledge. When I talk about what's the difference between man and the universe, I'm look.
I can't hear you, Stuart.
You got frozen.
Yeah, it looks like he dropped again.
I wonder if he's aware of it. Hmm. Yeah, he's aware.
Yeah, Bernice dropped too. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's okay to sing if you feel like singing.
I wonder if he's going to make it back.
I don't know.
Well,
Welcome, Bernhardt. Did you just join?
Yes, yes, I was late. I told the new times don't work for me at all. So I just made it, and my computer didn't work, the other one, so it's complicated. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
we're in the same state, and these times work much better for me.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's stay with the conversation, friends. If I may
Oh yeah.
suggest.
Now you can say. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Shut up.
No, not shut up, but let's just stay with the conversation. I apologize. I was knocked out. Chris was speaking before.
and I had finished, and you kind of dropped out, and then you were starting to clarify what you wanted to say in reference to Steve's, and then you left again.
Yeah. So if I leave again, please continue. So what I was saying was simply that I'm not so much seeking an understanding, but I'm seeking a communion. But I don't want to take a lot of time to go into that. I'd love to hear how these exchange lives in others on the call.
Well, Stuart, stay with that just a second, because you're seeking a communion, but then you went into not speaking about an example. You spoke about essentially the essential quality of what comes from Steiner's work on the occult science, the evolution of the earth and the different stages, and how that was helpful to your way of asking your question. It seemed that seemed to be what you were telling us, and so just link some sense of communion then brought you to where it seems to me, implicit in what you were telling in your story, that this information from Steiner's contribution to occult science, without referring to it, the elaboration of the evolution of the solar system and the human being out of the solar system and all the other forms of existence that have come as sloughing off of the human over time.
So what I'm saying there, Steve, what I'm saying there, what I'm saying there is that the knowledge is not in and of itself. It would lead to this, and I can only speak for myself, my sense that there's a profound relationship between the human being and the universe, and the sense that we are connected, we are one, and in time, this is something that I experienced as a young person, 12, 13. In time, I came to the notion of the microcosm and the macrocosm. But so it's not just the knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but it is that we are one with the universe. We have to unite with the universe. We have to, it's hard to find the right words to express it.
Well, I can see that you're talking about the knowledge of how everything goes together, that it goes together. So you had a great urge for the wholeness of everything in a certain way, you're saying. And that is the path of knowledge, the articulation of all the details and aspects in a coherent consciousness. That is what knowledge is. Whereas understanding is more of a feeling of the same thing, but more mystical in a way. More, like in German, I think the word is "Ich habe keine Ahnung." I have no idea. At first, the heart feels something. It doesn't have an idea about it, but it has a sense of something. And in the German way, that's sort of how the theory comes. It comes out of the heart has a sensing, and then the effort to bring things to consciousness then leads from a theory into the process of exploration that leads then to true knowing. And so I think that my sense is that the stage of the Ahnung is actually a kind of a sensing kind of understanding. It's vague, but it's real, and it leads one forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, the way I was talking, I think the sense of karma comes in a way that's largely unconscious. We're sort of, it's a product of our whole life. It's really about the life wisdom that we get from the life of hard knocks, really. And I think Queen Mother's story is such a perfect example of a wonderful American story of karma, in the gift she had to be awake to that very early in her own way. That, to my mind, is the power of this American story in her rendering of it. There's not an argument between one or the other. These are two doorways of the souls being led in different ways, and I think that that's what's really important. They both really have their place.
Yeah.
This one of knowledge and towards understanding. Yeah.
Queen Mother, any more comments from your side? Or anyone, Charlene?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Stuart, I think you mean by, let's see, community more important than understanding. And I did put it in the chat. Understanding really is a part of community, but I think you mean more a heartfelt understanding than an intellectual understanding, right?
Well, thank you. And the word was communion, not community. Communion.
Well, for both. Understanding the other person is really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And understanding ourselves.
For me, it goes back to this question of life is a love story. It's a love story. I don't know, Queen Mother, if I shared this with you, but when I met with Brian from the Brian Stevenson, his assistant, I said, I believe that this is a Black woman. He's a key figure in Montgomery. I said to her, I think there is this deep, deep longing, this yearning that's hard, that's not easy to come to between the races. That is, wherever there is separation, whether it's socially influenced or whether it just is an expression of very real differences, which are wonderful. You know, it's in the differences that we get the richness and the diversity. But there's like this quiet sort of underlying yearning, longing to connect. And I've been gifted with enough relationships with Black brothers and sisters and Native American brothers and sisters where I've, spent much, much time and work and conversation together that I can actually experience that there's this tremendous promise that can emerge where differences can unite. Can you add to that, Queen Mother? How does that speak to you, if I may ask?
I think you're very much. I think that's true, but there has to be a commitment between those that are trying to unite to do it cohesively, where it's not more destructive than it is collectively coming together in order that we have a better society. We all should be striving to aid and assist humanity in whatever way we can. And with some of us, it's easier than it is with others because some people's harbor scars that has been placed there for years and years. They don't know how to get beyond the hurt, the pain, the disappointment. If they don't have a connection within themselves, a higher I within themselves, then it is much more harder for them to overcome the trials that is placed in our path, because this is a journey. It's a journey, and we are on this journey. Hopefully, all of us are trying to get to the same place, whereby we'll have peace and rest in our last days. But even at that, there are some of us that do not want the harmony. So we bring about corruption and dispute, and it makes it hard for those of us that do want it to completely bring it together like it should be.
Queen Mother, are you familiar with Grandmother's Hands by Resma Menakem?
My
Got a book,
grandmother's
a
hand,
story?
Pardon?
I'm not.
Yeah, well, that book really helped me with the idea of how we all have collective trauma, and that's and why, and so to just settle our bodies is what I gained from that, to improve understanding and communication and communion with other people.
And prayer and supplication added to that can enhance it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I would recommend just looking at it and maybe Googling Resma Menakan, and I'd be interested in your opinion about the book. I can put it in the chat.
Good,
Okay, please do.
good. Steve, did you want to wrap up that thread? We're coming towards a conclusion. I do want to invite anybody who hasn't spoken to offer some thoughts, but do you want to wrap up the prior thread, Steve?
I think this ball of yarn is pretty well wound up.
Good. Chris, can I ask you if you'd go to the second to last chapter in Knowledge of the Higher World about the median meeting with the guardian of the threshold? And if you would put it on the screen and read a few paragraphs into it so we can get a sense for this remarkable reality.
So what part of the
I
guardian?
I believe it's the second last chapter about the guardian of the threshold.
Yes, but where? Where within that lecture?
At the beginning of it.
Okay.
And let me just, give me one moment. Just 1 second. I want to read to you just a short paragraph and then invite Chris to bring us a little bit into this. And that is, this is the guardian of the threshold speaking. The question is, who is the guardian of the threshold? From now on, though living outwardly and visibly on the earth, you will live at the same time in the realm of death. That is, in the realm of eternal life. Indeed, I am your angel of death. But at the same time, I also bring you never-ending higher life. While living in the body, you will die through me and experience rebirth into indestructible existence. Once again, if I may. From now on, though living outwardly and visibly on the earth, you will live at the same time in the realm of death.
Did he freeze again?
Looks like it.
Hmm. Hmm. Hey. Thank you for that reference in the chat, Charlene.
Oh, you're welcome. I thought maybe you had left and you missed it. So thank you
No.
for letting me know.
Are you able to read, Chris?
Yes, you ready?
Thank you.
Okay. The important experiences marking the student's ascent into the higher worlds includes his meeting with the guardian of the threshold. Strictly speaking, there are two guardians, the lesser and the greater. The student meets the lesser guardian when the threads connecting willing, feeling, and thinking within the finer astral and etheric bodies begin to loosen in the way described in the foregoing chapter. The greater guardian is encountered when this sundering of the connections extends to the physical parts of the body, that is, at first to the brain. The lesser guardian is a sovereign being. He does not come into existence, as far as the student is concerned, until the latter has reached the requisite stage of development. Only some of its most important characteristics can here be indicated. The attempt will now be made to describe in narrative form this meeting with the lesser guardian of the threshold, as a result of which the student learns that his thinking, feeling, and willing have become released within him from their inner connection. A truly terrible spectral being confronts him, and he will need all the presence of mind and faith in the security of his path, which he has had ample opportunity to acquire in the course of his previous training. You want me to keep going?
If you would, Chris, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. The guardian proclaims his signification somewhat in the following words. Hitherto, powers invisible to thyself watched over thee. They saw to it that in the course of thy lives each of thy good deeds brought its reward, and each of thine evil deeds was attended by its evil results. Thanks to their influence, thy character formed itself out of thy life experiences and thy thoughts. They were the instruments of thy destiny. They ordained that measure of joy and pain allotted to thee in thine incarnations, according to thy conduct in lives gone by. They ruled over thee as the all-embracing law of karma. These powers will now partly release thee from their constraining influence, and henceforth must thou accomplish for thyself a part of the work which hitherto they performed for thee. Destiny struck thee many a hard blow in the past. Thou knowest not why. Each blow was the consequence of a harmful deed in a bygone lie. Thou foundest joy and gladness, and thou didst take them as they came. They too were the fruits of former deeds. Thy character shows many a beautiful side, and many an ugly flaw. Thou hast thyself to thank for both, for they are the result of thy previous experiences and thoughts. These were till now unknown to thee. Their effects alone were made manifest. The karmic powers, however, beheld all thy deeds in former lives, and all thy most secret thoughts and feelings, and determined accordingly thy present self and thy present mode of life. But now all the good and evil sides of thy bygone lives shall be revealed to thee. Hitherto they were interwoven with thine own being. They were in thee, and thou couldst not see them, even as thou canst not behold thine own brain with physical eyes. But now they become released from thee. They detach themselves from thy personality. They assume an independent form which thou canst see, even as thou beholdest the stones and plants of the outer world. And I am that very being who shaped my body out of thy good and evil achievements. My spectral form is woven out of thine own life's record. Till now thou hast borne me invisibly within thee, and it was well that this was so, for the wisdom of thy destiny, though concealed from thee, could thus work within thee, so that the hideous stains on my form should be blotted out. Now that I have come forth from within thee, that concealed wisdom, too, has departed from thee. It will pay no further heed to thee. It will leave the work in thy hands alone. I must become a perfect and glorious being, or fall a prey to corruption. And should this occur, I would drag thee also down with me into a dark and corrupt world. If thou wouldst avoid this, then thine own wisdom must become great enough to undertake the task of that other concealed wisdom which has departed from thee. As the form of visible to thyself, I will never for an instant leave thy side, once thou hast crossed my threshold. And in future, whenever thou dost act or think wrongly, thou wilt straightway perceive thy guilt as a hideous, demoniacal distortion of my form. Only when thou hast made good all thy bygone wrongs, and hast so purified thyself that all further evil is, for thee, a thing impossible, only then will my being have become transformed into radiant beauty. Then, too, shall I again become united with thee for the welfare of thy future activity.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Well, friends, as we draw this to a conclusion, then I want to just point us to these next days. Any comments on what we just heard? And I think, if I may, I'll simply go around and invite people to say anything they wish. Charlene, any comment from your side?
Just thank you. And thank you everyone for being here and contributing. And yeah, those are my words. Thank you.
Great. Just going down the list. Steve, any comments?
It just seems to me that what Chris just read to be expressed as a being of the revealer of karma. That this being is a revealer of karma.
Yep. Chris, any comments yourself? Just going down the list.
Two sayings come to my mind that Steiner quotes in his lectures, Christianity as Mystical Fact. They come from Heraclitus. The connected of things is a tension between opposites, just as in a bow or a stringed instrument. Now, if we think of a stringed instrument, there is a tensioning at both ends. And that requires that each end does its own tuning, so to speak, to make sure that the whole is in tune, i.e. working together. The other, also from Heraclitus, let's see, where is that? Oh, I just had it. It goes like this. Immortals are mortal. Mortals immortal. Living the one's death, dying the other's life.
Mm. And what would Chris add to that himself?
Well, what is there to add?
Yeah.
Need to just think on it. Live with it. In view of what was spoken.
Great. Great. So let's continue. Andrew and then Bernhardt, if you have any comments. Can you hear us, Andrew? Bernhardt?
Yeah, I missed the original question, so I was just listening, and So what I saw in the previous text is the remoteness of qualities like respect, adoration, and wonder in our society, and so that is again and again a big problem. So I feel so there's a great difference between America and Europe as far as the Simons van Emmichhofen spoke about that in a relation to nature. He said that nature is so far more apart from human beings here than in Europe. So in Europe, you live in nature, and here you live opposite nature. You can look at it like as a picture, but it's very hard to experience yourself with the intensity that you can develop in Europe. So with nature, and especially I found it especially in the British Isles, and so there's where the elemental forces are living. What I want to say is that so the remoteness to admiration and respect and wonder is something that if that can't be achieved and we are distracted so massively, then this question of enthusiasm is not properly addressed. So we can only learn what we are really learn what we are enthusiastic for. I think that one. Or when let's put it like this: you can help learn, of course, in a different way. So that is connected to us, even if we don't remember it. So if once we are enthusiastic for something, that even if it goes into the subconscious, so it stays with us, it becomes part of us. So it's like you love it, subject, you love it, but you're enthusiastic about it. So then it's a certain fire that comes with it. That's all I want to say at this point. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bernhard. Nikki, any comments? Are you there, Nikki?
I put my thoughts in the chat. It's something that I put together many years ago. The laws of nature and nature's, God. And anyway, we're in we're micro particles in this larger macro system. So what are we willing to do in order to make it healthy and right? Just take a look at it. I put together something way back. I can't remember the exact words, and it is, oh, there it is. Okay, maybe I'll be able to. Okay, the laws of nature and nature's God imply that our intended form of government was to function organically like a healthy microsystem within a larger macro system. So the question becomes, what is it that I am willing to supply to my current microsystem that will effectively support and enhance the efficiency of a larger macro system governed by the laws of nature and of nature's God? And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. You are a loyal proponent, reminder. Thank you. So what I wanted to say about the passage that Chris read, and then we'll invite Queen Mother to offer any concluding thoughts and a prayer.
Stuart?
Yeah.
Can I add just one thing in reference to what Bernhardt brought in reference
Sure.
to the nature? I don't know,
Sure.
Bernhardt, if you are familiar with Steiner's exposition about the nature forces in North America versus the nature forces in Europe. It was indicated that in Europe, the human beings have worked with the nature forces for many generations, whereas in North America, the indigenous people simply did their best to just simply carry and maintain and support what was in place. Therefore, the nature forces in the Americas are still very primitive, are still rather wild. And I don't remember exactly where, but that came out of what some of Rudolf Steiner's indications and Dr. Benish, who was did a lot in terms of world geography.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris.
That brings to mind by Native American friends that when they gather in a circle, they leave a place empty and they designate that the double or the shadow is to reside there. So they recognize this force, this darkened shadow force exists, and they designated a place. It is within their experience, and allowed. But it's an interesting point you make, Chris, that they just maintain it. This would be an interesting conversation to a greater length, but I'm not sure we should enter into it now. Thank you for bringing it up. I think what struck me the most with what Chris read is the reminder, which is what friend Rudolf Steiner offers us as a scientist of the spirit, of the fact that there are higher laws, there are realities, there are beings, there is a method to the seeming madness. There is a guardian of the threshold that, we may have some people may have the appearance that we can get away with things in life, but no, not at all. Not at all. One thinks of Christ being told about the adulteress, and as the Pharisees are rehearsing her sins, he kneels down and with his finger writes in the sand. I think he's recording in the book of life what she's being told, what she's done. This becomes now part of her destiny. But he who was innocent and who could cast the first stone didn't. It was grace. So that's what struck me the most about what Chris read. And I'm glad as we draw to an end this consideration of anthroposophy and anthroposophia, we could elevate our conversation into this realm of the spirit, beyond the intellectual, the theoretical, the abstract, into the living realm. I'm grateful for that. Queen Mother, from your side, any comments, and then a final prayer, if you will?
Thank you. What it said to me is to maintain and keep my conscience clear. To maintain and keep my conscience clear. If you can maintain yourself, keep your conscience clear, you will treat your brothers and sisters as yourself, and you will do the things that is required of you. When you read this passage, it's constantly telling you that we have to maintain ourselves. As we come to the close of this meeting, may we clear our minds and bow our heads. Most holy and gracious God, we come before you at this time, thanking you for this presence of all of these that are here, that has been able to share their wisdom and their knowledge. Allow us to get understanding, that we may be able to input it into ourselves, share it with others as we go day to day. And as we continue to do your work, for we have committed ourselves unto thee, knowing that you have a higher call. And because of that higher call, we must maintain our character. and must maintain ourselves in such a way that we can glorify you. So we thank you, Lord, for this day. We thank you for grace and mercy, wisdom and knowledge, understanding, and the ability to apply. Now, as we go to our destination, as you lay us down to sleep, allow us to wake tomorrow to a new day and be able to continue to do your will as we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
So friends, we're gonna pause for a couple of days, maybe 2 days, and then I'm going to be sending a response to a question that Tom Mellett put to us all. And we will find our way into the next step together. So I'll be sending out some reflections and hope to get responses from you all as we fashion this convocation together. So there'll be
What's our next day? Do you have the next day in mind already, or is that gonna have to show itself?
that'll show itself. We probably won't do anything for 2 days.
Okay, thank you.
But then I will be sending out a response to Tom Mellett that he's addressed us all with respect to friend Rudolf Steiner.
Great. Are you hoping that he'll be joining us?
Yeah, I think Tom will be. Yeah,
Great.
Tom and Gene Yeager and others. Kenda.
Okay. Oh, great.
Thank you, friends, very much. And we will be back, I think, 9 o'clock. There are very few people who came 9 o'clock in the morning, which is 876. So I think we're going to go back to noon, and we may go a little, well, given Bernhardt's comment, we may start a little earlier in the evening, but I'll check in with people on that. But thank you one and all. We are fashioning something together. We're finding our way.
Stuart?
Very great. Yeah.
Just want to let the people know that with that systems and the micro and the macro and so on and so forth, I put in the chat a PDF that I did from the slides that I presented years ago. And one is about vocations, finding the vocation within the mix. And the other one is mobilizing change through the systems process.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, because with any system, if you find out where it broke, it's either going to fix itself or it's going to self-destruct. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, one and all.
Nice.
We will continue.
Thank you, Stuart.
Good. Take
Thank
care.
you, Nikki.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Yahweh bless. Bye-bye.